are those voices?
And that is the opening for the game Call of the Sea. As you can see, quite an enigmatic opening. Really draws you in. You initially are extremely curious. What are these voices? They seem to be saying a name, and then a woman's voice answers, what's going on? Where am I? And then suddenly you find yourself swimming underwater. Very interesting. I will say when I first started playing this game, I didn't know very much about it. Didn't really read too much into it, really. I try not to go too in-depth. I like to sort of hop into these games with a fresh, open eye, without any sort of, my mind having read the description already trying to take me someplace. But with Call of the Sea, how everything initially started, I did read the initial description and then hopped right into it. And one of the things, the only way I could describe Call of the Sea is the sort of quintessential 1930s expedition slash Lovecraftian sort of tale. I remember reading such stories, I can't speak, such stories, such of these, expeditions to far-off islands or lands, becoming immersed in the culture, learning about what's going on, and of course, the most classic, expedition arrives to said island or land, seeking some sort of treasure or mystery. There are mishaps, death typically, maybe even murder within the group. Tensions are rising, stakes are rising. There's always some sort of curse or ancient god or religion or spirit, and it all culminates into this sort of stunning display of storytelling in many ways. Overused maybe, perhaps, in some ways, but this game does a very good job of balancing it all together, a mix of that sort of expeditionary searching with the Lovecraftian elements, but does not devolve into horror. Everything about this game is sort of storybook and is emotionally charged. There are elements where, such things such as slavery and sacrifice are discussed, but there's nothing necessarily bloody or cruel. And that I appreciate very much in such a game. Now let's talk a little bit about the sort of plot of the game. As you saw in the beginning, we are transported into this sort of strange world with Norah. Norah finds herself swimming around in a dream, and she wakes up suddenly on a ship. And we discover that she's on this ship on an excursion off to Tahiti and an island just a few miles away from it, trying to find out what happened to her husband and her husband's expedition. We then discover that Norah is ill with some sort of mysterious illness that has to do with spots on her hands, and as such she actually covers her hands so that no one can see them and sort of, judge her or become frightened by them. And she manages to convince a captain to take her to this island, drop her off for 3 days to search for her husband and the expedition, and then come back and pick her up. And the whole story is Norah's sort of wandering the island, discovering the secrets that it holds, wondering exactly what happened to the expedition. There's no sign of anyone on the island. Tattered tents, bits and pieces of equipment left here and there, and Norah is left to sort of solve these mysteries through the use of puzzles and logical thinking. Now I will say, the puzzle elements of this game were enjoyable in some ways, simple for some and not so simple for others. The videos of my Let's Play of this game, a lot of content was cut from them purely because I realized I was not as smart as I once thought that I was. I will say, it depends on the level of focus that you have and how much you pay attention to these puzzles. I will say there were a couple of puzzles that I was so caught up on that I had to look up a guide in order to proceed any further. That being said, I personally take that as the puzzles being designed very well. For the playability factor, you really do have to pay attention. A lot of work went into these puzzles to make them, as detailed as they were. And I think that rolls into the sort of just overall design of the game. There are shared elements between all sorts of different types of puzzles. You really learn about the island's inhabitants through the puzzles themselves as much as your exploration. And the design of everything, very sort of Polynesian in many ways, but not. I think the game designers did a very good job of including sort of these alien elements, if you will, to sort of show that, yes, this is familiar, but not quite. And speaking of the design of the game in terms of not just the puzzles, but just the overall design itself, the graphics, very well done. The design of the game, not quite animated, not quite storybook, an animated storybook. Things were simplistic enough not to be realistic, but had enough realism to it to be believable, if that makes sense. It's as if you were walking through this, you were reading, one of these classic 1930s novels, and you were transported into the world. Very, very well done. Sound design was also well done. And for the most part, I will say there were certain portions where dialogue sort of doubled on itself. The subtitles did not match the dialogue, and that sort of threw me off initially as well. But for the most part, the sound design worked very well. It was very believable to be walking, on a beach or through a storm or through a creaking ship. Very well done. The voice acting was very well done. I'd say there were a couple of voices that were maybe slightly awkward, such as the captain, but Norah's voice actor did an absolutely fantastic job. I do like her voice. The voice quality, for some reason, was very believable to me as a 1930s person. I will say that some of the language used, though, having read a lot of literature from that time period, did sort of throw me off. It did feel a little modernized, but I think still did a very good job. And speaking of Norah, and sort of diving into this a bit, the story of Norah was absolutely fascinating, and I think the game does a very good job of sort of pacing you as you're going through each level, each section of the game, and trying to figure out, what's going on. You find out hints and clues here and there, finally culminating in the ultimate reveal. And not just one ultimate reveal, there are, I would say, 2 reveals at the end of the game that answer 2 distinct questions, and not in ways that you necessarily thought initially, but in a good way. And I will say that I was not expecting the end. I thought that this game was going to be very linear, and it was, all the way up until the very end, where you actually get to make a choice. And I would say not necessarily that neither of those choices were wrong. I think they were very well balanced against what the rest of the game had sort of laid out, including Norah's relationship with her missing husband that she was seeking, as well as Norah's relationship to the island itself and what she discovered about herself there. Both choices would have been correct with those 2 considerations balanced against each other. And I will say that the end of the game, which I won't spoil for anyone who wants to play it, I did cry. I actually did cry at the ending of this game, particularly with the choice that I chose, because one of the things that the game really established throughout it all was just how close Norah and her husband were, just how dearly they loved each other. And that was evident throughout the entire game, evident in the notes left behind, evident in how Norah talked about her husband. And I think that was a refreshing thing, we shall say. There are many games where there was another female present on the expedition, and I've seen many games that end up turning it into the husband and the other female ended up getting together, and that hurt the woman, the wife who was searching for them. But I like very much how this game established that was simply not the case at all. Norah and her husband were very much in love and very much wanted to get back to each other, and her husband was very much driven to help her by love. So I would say overall, I would give this game a I'd say a 4 out of 5. Talking just a little bit for some of the sound design, mismatched subtitles, puzzle complexity. Again, very well done, but I do think, or maybe this is just me and I'm not very smart, but I do think there were some puzzles that were almost a little too difficult. But it was still a very enjoyable experience. The music was wonderful. The story had me gripped. I was so excited to play this game once I realized where it was heading, because it reminded me so much of these sort of stories from my youth that I had read before, expeditions and Lovecraftian elements. And again, I will stress that this game does not, has very, very, very slight horror elements. There is no blood, gore, craziness. You don't see anything, if that makes sense. But it was still very enjoyable, and there's still enough of a mystery to keep you wandering and trying to figure out exactly what is going on. So 4 out of 5 for just a little bit of docking there, but overall a fantastic game that I highly suggest that you all play for yourselves. And if you do, let me know what you thought of it. Did you like the design of the puzzles? Were you able to get through them? How did you like the graphics, the story? Like me, did you want to see more of the story? I personally would have loved to see this game expanded even a little more and diving maybe into the background of the island a bit. I felt like there were still a lot of questions unanswered. But again, for what it was, this game was excellently done. So a shout out to the game developers and designers, the voice actors, those who designed the music and audio and so forth. You did create a marvelous game that was very interesting and very unique, I would personally say. And I thank you for doing it. And honestly, the plot of this game has a better plot and conclusion than half of the TV shows and movies that Hollywood, or anywhere else for that matter, is putting out today. So pat on the back to all of you. Let's see, that's all I really have to say. Give this game a try. You can find it on Steam. I believe it's less than $20, not too expensive. And I actually got it during the Steam sale. I think it was, I believe, 75% off. So quite a good deal, really. And again, if you do happen to play it, let me know. I'd love to discuss it with you. And with that being said, Pax vobiscum. Have a wonderful week, everyone, and I shall see you in the next video. Goodbye.